Dominant and conscientious personality types are task-focused, so they prioritize getting the job done. While they care about people, they think first about task. Now, I don't want you to think that they don't care about people. They do. But when they come into a situation, the first question they're going to ask themselves is, how does this task get done? The second question is, and how are the people going to work out inside that task? But most important is the task. They look at that first. Inspirational and supportive personality types are people-focused. So they care about how people are treated and how people feel. And that's the first thing that they think about. While they care about task, they think first about people. So don't think that inspirational and supportive personality type don't care about getting the task done. That's not true. They care about that too, but they think first about people. So if you worked for, let's say, a D or a C personality type and you felt a little bit sick, you might come in the morning and say, I feel a little sick, and the D or the C might say, well, why not stay till lunch, and if you still feel sick, then go home. But if you work for an I or an S and you feel sick, you might come in the morning and they say, honey, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. Go home, take care of yourself. They think first about the people side, then about the task side. Let's look at trust as viewed by dominant and conscientious personality types, because the personality types view trust differently. So for the D and the C, trust is earned. They view new relationships and opportunities from a discerning, cautious viewpoint. So they start new relationships and opportunities at 0 on the trust scale. Imagine you had a bucket of water. Well, there's nothing in the bucket when you first start. You have to build that. And trust increases based on consistent behavior and performance. But don't think you're starting off with a full bucket. You're starting off with an empty bucket, and it's up to you to show consistent behavior so that you fill that bucket of trust up. Trust is viewed by inspiring and supportive personality types is quite different than trust is viewed by D and C personality types, that dominant and conscientious. Because for the I and the S, trust is at least initially given pretty easily. They view new relationships and opportunities with an uncritical eye. They give new people an automatic 10 on the trust scale, and you only lose trust through bad behavior and or poor performance. Now, I will say this, although trust is easily given, now I'm talking particularly about that supportive type, although trust is easily given by an S, if you violate their trust, like if you betray them or really break trust, it's very hard to earn back. And it's going to take you some time and consistent behavior over time to win that trust back, if you can win it at all. So don't violate their trust. They give it easily, but they expect it returned and reciprocated. Here are the biggest irritants of each personality type. For dominant people, the first one is easy, and that's having their time wasted. And again, that's anything from long emails to long meetings that don't have a point or an agenda. When you waste their time, it kills them inside. And then I would say being forced to be too transparent. Not that they can't be transparent, but they want to be in control of how transparent they become and when. Supportive people, the biggest irritant is having conflict forced on them. If they're involved in office politics and drama, they didn't choose it, they're dragged into it, they're forced to choose sides, that kind of thing. They hate it, it makes them crazy. And then being forced to interact with what they feel are insensitive people. People who are rude, people who are abrasive. I have a client who's a very high D, and one time I said, I think for a supportive type, you're kind of like a manual car, with a stick shift that doesn't have synchro mesh. Synchro mesh is that stuff inside the stick shift that makes the gears shift smoothly. So, there's no grinding of gears, but sometimes with him, the gears grind a little bit because he doesn't use the synchro mesh, and that is a major irritant to the supportive personality type. For inspiring people, the biggest irritant is being forced to strictly follow an inflexible process. They like there to be a little bit of give. They like some flexibility around process, knowing that that's not quite their type, that's okay, and you give them a little bit of grace. And then not being allowed to talk is a very major irritant for them. They want to talk. For conscientious people, that's easy. It's jobs done poorly or done half well and then left, or not having enough information. Let's look at the biggest fears of each personality type. For dominant people, the fear is getting taken advantage of. They hate the thought that that might be happening. Recently, I was in a developing country with family members, and one of my family members was negotiating, bartering over a craft that they wanted to buy. And it was going back and forth, and the negotiation was getting pretty heated. And our guide came up and said, just so you know, I think you're about 18 cents apart in dollars, just so you're aware. And we all laughed, and she stepped up and paid the price. But dominant people hate the thought that someone is taking advantage of them. Supportive people hate the thought that they might be offending others. So this fear sometimes leads them to not say things that should be said, to not address situations that should be addressed, because they just hate the thought that maybe they're offending that person. It's always in the back of their mind, that fear. Inspiring people fear being socially rejected. The worst thing you can do to an inspiring person who works for you is say, you know what, please just don't talk anymore. Just go in your office, do your work, sit at your computer. I don't want to hear about it. And we're not really interested in your ideas. And by the way, we're not really interested in you. Just go by yourself there. They are at immediate flight risk. Now, probably any personality is at immediate flight risk for that, but they hate the thought that someone is going to reject them. They care about being liked, and they care actually about being popular. Conscientious people's biggest fear is being accused of incompetence, because they are the ones who pride themselves on always getting it right. They don't make mistakes. They are the ones who are competent. They are the ones who do it perfectly and thoroughly. So if there is an accusation, like if you have to talk to a conscientious person about work performance that you're not happy with, be careful, because they're likely to flare if you poke that soft spot for them, because they view themselves as the ones who are very competent. So if you do that, you better have real-time examples and dates and times and specifics, because they don't want to just hear, hey, you could get better at this. They don't like that. They're the competent ones. Let's look at how each personality type relates to time, because they all view time differently. And actually, this could be a whole course on its own, but I'm just going to give you an overview. So let's talk about Ds first, how they relate to time. They think about the future and the present. They don't really care much about the past. They're very concerned about today. They're very concerned about tomorrow. But the past has already happened. It's done. It's out of their minds. It's gone. Past doesn't contribute to present or future goals, so they don't think about it. I think of my old farm boss back in the day, very strong D, and he had a temper. He would blow up sometimes, but when the blow up was done, it was done. He never came back. He never gave you passive aggressive shots. He'd forgotten all about it because he was moving forward. So if you're in relationship to a D and they get mad or they say something that maybe hurts your feelings or offends you, and you're wondering, what should I have said? What do they really think? And all that. You know what? You're probably wasting your time because they've probably forgotten all about it. They're not thinking about the past. They're thinking about right now and tomorrow. Here's how inspiring people relate to time. They think most about the future. They live in all of the exciting possibilities that tomorrow could bring if some of their ideas came to fruition. They think about the present only when it's exciting. So let's say you're a young parent and you come home and your kids are squalling and someone needs a diaper changed, and you're sitting there at the dinner table. And you know what? You're there in body, you're physically present, but your mind is 100 miles away. You know where your mind is? It's in the future. It's in tomorrow, it's in next week, it's in next year, and all the things you could do. But you're not really that excited about the present because it's not exciting. They're into the present if it's exciting. And they don't think much about or even remember the past. To them, the past is over and the future is what really matters. So that inspiring style is really focused on future. Here's how supportive people relate to time. Let me just say, supportive people look at time very differently than dominant people or inspiring people. They think about the present and the past, and they actually dislike thinking about the future and planning and dreaming about the future. So if you sit down with an S and say, hey, let's just blue sky, let's just dream, man. We're going to make a dream board and put it on a whiteboard and stuff like that. They think like, forget it. Let's think about practical things today, and let's rehash the past as well. Now, because they dislike conflict and because they fear offending others, often they'll replay and analyze negative interactions that have happened in the past. Maybe the past was that day, but they go home and they might lay in bed and stew about it and think about it. What could I have said differently? What did that person mean when they said that comment in that tone? Now, if they're thinking about this and that person is a D or an I, or a blend of a D and an I, they're wasting their time. The D and the I don't remember. They didn't think about it that much. They probably just threw it out there while their mind was on the present and the future. But that supportive type often replays the past. And sometimes they'll replay the past not just for a day, but for 2 or 3 weeks, thinking about it and stewing about it. Here's how conscientious people relate to time. They think about the present and the past, and they worry about the future. They worry because the future is unpredictable and it can't be controlled. The present to some degree can be controlled. The past, can be controlled because it's already happened. So you can look at the past and look at historical trends and things like that. But you can't control the future. So this worries them. They want to control things. They want things to turn out well. And do you remember that they spot what's wrong first? So they see what could go wrong in the future and they worry about it. Let's look at each personality type and how that type interacts with stress. Now, this could be a whole course on its own, how to manage stress and how to deal with stress and all that sort of thing. But I'm just going to give you a real quick overview of how each personality type manages and deals with stress. First thing to remember is that under stress, the categories that you score highest in become magnified. And the more stress you're under, the more those qualities will be displayed. So those categories that you score strong and very strong in, under stress, are going to go higher and higher. Here's how the D acts under stress. First, they become less communicative. Now, the D at the best of times is not a big small talker. They're not chatty. They're doers, not talkers. But under stress, when they're under extreme stress, that D just goes way higher and they become even less communicative than they normally would be. They may become tyrannical and demanding. So where they might communicate is when they're barking orders, when they're issuing commands, but not giving long explanations and patient explanations of how to do things. They may bruise the feelings of others under stress. In fact, they probably will bruise the feelings of others because they become short and clipped. They just do whatever is necessary to complete the task on time and on deadline. And under stress, that D just might go right through the roof. Here's how the I acts under stress. First, they may begin talking in circles. They're verbal anyway, but under stress, that talking component is just going to go higher and higher and higher, and they're going to talk much more than they normally would. Second, they may become scattered and unfocused. If you were to come to an I and they were working at their computer station and the stress was on and you said, I need this file now, find it, find it, find it. Oh, their mind gets unfocused, they get rattled, and they're not sure how to find anything under extreme stress like that. It doesn't focus their mind necessarily. They may wish to escape in healthy or unhealthy ways if the stress lasts too long or if they don't love the work. So healthy ways are, they may want to play too much. Like, hey, I'm just going to cut out and go golfing. That's not as bad. Unhealthy ways, they can turn to inappropriate ways to handle stress. Chemicals, alcohol, drugs, affairs, stuff that's inappropriate. Or they may enjoy the excitement and the adrenaline rush, especially if they're doing a job that they're good at, and they might seek out that stress because it can kind of be like being a thrill seeker. And here's how the S acts under stress. First, they may feel paralyzed, and they may become unsure of what to do next. I have a friend who's a very senior person at a company, and he told me about when he was a younger guy, and he was doing his studies, he was working on a master's degree, he was holding on 2 jobs, he was involved in athletics, and he said at some point he just froze up. And he described it as, he just felt like a deer in the headlights. He just didn't know what to do next. And he was working on his master's thesis and he was newly married and his wife helped him through and he dictated to her and she just helped him through it. But he said, under extreme stress, he can just feel paralyzed. They may become compliant and self-sacrificing so that others can reach their goals. And this can be a healthy thing, like, hey, I'm just going to, support. And it can also be unhealthy where it can turn to a bit of a martyr syndrome where it's, you know what, I don't want to do it, but I'll do all the work. You go home, I'll stay late. I'll just sacrifice myself completely to get this done. But they may also become bitter in doing it. And they may actually become physically ill if the stress includes conflict with others and if it goes on too long. And finally, here's how the C acts under stress. They become more verbal, but as they're talking, they're focusing on deficiencies and negatives. Remember, a conscientious person sees first what's wrong, what could be better. So they can feel like a downer when there's a lot of stress going on because they're pointing out all the ways that things aren't being done well, all the ways things could be done better, all the ways that people aren't living up to the expectations that they have of them. They may become very controlling and picky. And that might look like, I have to sign off on everything. Before anything gets shipped out of here, it goes through me. Because remember, their worst fear is being accused of doing a bad job, and then it comes back to them and it reflects on their competence. And they're the competent ones. They don't get things wrong. So they don't want that to happen. So under stress, they might get very controlling and very picky. They may procrastinate. If they believe that the job can't be done perfectly, they might just put it off and put it off and put it off because they think, I can't do this to a level 10. Whereas people down the line might be thinking, please give it to us. Even if it's a 7, that's good enough. But a conscientious person, particularly a very strong one, is not wired to do things to a level 7. So they might just find reasons not to do it at all. And they may become bogged down in unimportant detail. We can all identify with this, I think. The idea that, you know what, at least this spreadsheet will be right. Yes, everything else is going in the toilet, but dang it, I'm going to get the magenta on that spreadsheet banner right.